I'm Rita Rowson, the Attendance and Inclusion Lead for Truro and Penwith Academy Trust, and we have worked hard to devise a strategic attendance approach across all of our schools. And what we have considered is how we target our hard-to-reach families, how we work hard to include our children and young people, and to really create a sense of belonging. What we've worked upon is we've tried to steer away from attendance percentages, and we've looked toward a broken weeks model. So we consider our absence now in terms of weeks broken by absence rather than percentages. And what we've found is that by doing this, it's allowed us to really focus and target the children who are missing school on a regular basis rather than children who are absent for a duration of time, you know, with regard to an illness or a period of holiday. So that strategic approach has led us to put in place a tiered response. So that tiered response operates over 4 tiers, and it starts with what we call our universal approach, and that's everybody's responsibility. So, you know, from every member of staff, whether it's teaching, support, site management, it's everybody's responsibility to welcome our children for that sense of belonging, for them to know that we value them, that we care about them, that we want them in, and actually that we miss them. So, you know, we're not saying to children anymore, where have you been? Why are you late? We're saying it's good to see you. It's good to have you back. Is there anything that you need? Have you got everything that you need? And that's our universal approach, and that's across all of our schools. And it's been a work in progress. It's been challenging. We've had to change views. We've had to change focus. It's been a learning curve for us all, but actually it's been really powerful in making those children feel that they belong, a sense of community, that we want them, that we miss them. Actually, when we talked to our pupils, that was one of the things that came out. Actually, that they're not always missed, and that was really hard to hear, that our own pupils, our own children didn't feel that we miss them. Well, we do miss them and we want them there, and that's part of how we include them, and that's part of how we make them feel that they belong. So that's our universal approach. You know, our tutors are instrumental, our class teachers at primary level are instrumental in valuing our children and making them know that they're valued, that we recognise how important they are and that we want the very best for them. We move into Tier 1, which is where we notice that their attendance isn't as it should be, and that they've had weeks broken by absence. And that's 2 weeks. So 2 weeks in a half term, 3 weeks in a term. And then we put out a letter that's very supportive, so we've steered away, we've changed our language, we've steered away from we're concerned, we're alarmed, we're worried, we need. What we're saying now is, can we help? You know, is there anything that we need to know? What can we do to support? So that language in the letter has changed, and that goes out, as I say, at those 2 broken weeks or 3 in a term. And it's just offering parents, carers an opportunity to come and speak to us, to just say, look, this is what's happening, and it gives us an opportunity to help. So that's Tier 1. From Tier 1, we move into Tier 2, and this is where our real work begins. So Tier 2 is about us identifying when a pupil or a child has had 3 weeks broken by absence in a half term, 5 in a term. And that's where we look to introduce something that we've called a pupil support plan. So it's an individual piece of work for every pupil who fits that criteria of broken weeks. So we ask parents, carers to come into school very supportively. The letter is all about what can we do to help, what can we do to support, what adjustments do we need to consider in terms of any barriers that we've identified to attendance. And that's called a pupil support plan meeting. So we invite parents and carers in. We lead that meeting with what we call a child's wishes form. So we complete a child's wishes or a young person's wishes form prior to that meeting. And that's just a very basic approach to their lived experience of school. So what's working, what isn't working, what do they enjoy, what don't they enjoy, what could be different, what could be better, What could be different at home? We've had some really interesting answers to those questions, both at primary and secondary level. Some that have been quite comical, some that have been easy to fix, and some really quite heartbreaking. You know, when you have children saying, I'd like more food in the cupboards, or I'd like mummy to stop crying, it's really hard to hear that. But it's really powerful, actually, when we get to those meetings with parents. It's really powerful, and those Child's Wishes forms lead those discussions with parents around the barriers to attendance and what can we do to support, what can we do to effect change. Those meetings are really bespoke, really tailored around any barriers to attendance that we know of, that we've identified, and also that we encourage the parents. We really foster those relationships with parents and carers, because what we're trying to promote is a sense of support. We want them to feel as valued as we do their children. We want them to feel included. We want them to feel that sense of community and belonging. The pupil support plan is a really important part of how we work with the parent and carer, and how we make those adjustments and put those support mechanisms in place to effect the change. And what we do is we're really clear. So there's a really clear template. So we identify where we're at, where we want to be, and how do we get there? What actions do we need to put in place? What do we need to agree as a team, as a collective? Because this isn't us against them. This isn't them against us. This is us all working together to effect change, best possible outcomes for that child or that young person. But what we're also really, really clear to do is lay out what those adjustments and support components look like, but also what the expectations are for parents. So what do we expect of that parent in terms of what can they do to support their child? What can they do to support us to support their child? And that really starts to lay out how we're going to work together and what we need from that parent to be able to support the change. So what's been a really important aspect of expectations within that pupil support plan is really being clear with parents about what we expect from them in order to ensure that we're able to move forward, because what we have to always consider and be mindful of is the legal responsibility to ensure their children attend school regularly. So, you know, what we're asking for is for them to work with us. We want to work collectively. We want to support them, but we also need to be able to show the level of engagement so that we can evidence that they are doing everything within their power to support us, to support their child to effect change. That's ultimately what the goal of the pupil support plan is. It's been quite a taxing process in terms of getting those expectations right. So the staff that have undertaken the pupil support plans are very focused on, you know, the right support, the right adjustments for that child or that young person. But what we've had to work hard as a collective, as a trust, is to make sure that those expectations are really clear for parents in terms of how they fulfil their legal responsibility. Because where we move from tier 2 and those pupil support plans is we move into tier 3, which is actually enforcing a parent's duty to help their child to attend school regularly. So the pupil support plans are very clear in terms of the adjustments and the support that we will put in place. We identify those barriers to attendance, and then we're very clear about what we expect from parents, what we expect from us, what we expect those adjustments to look like, and then we put in place a review. So we always come back together within 4 to 6 weeks of that pupil support plan to review where we're at. Have we made progress? If we have, what's working well? Does it need changing? Do any parts of that pupil support plan need adjusted? Are any new barriers coming to light that we need to consider? So that it's a very fluid process. That pupil support plan is always working. We're always considering it. We need to always be reviewing it, and we need parents and carers to be on board with that. What we've found is that's created a real sense of community, and we've had some really, really positive outcomes from those pupil support plans in how we've really engaged some really, really hard to reach families who now feel supported, who want to come into school and tell us when things have changed negatively and positively. That's been really rewarding for staff, and actually has been instrumental in the changes for the child. So that's the tier 2 really in a nutshell. So when we move into tier 3, it's because we've not been able to affect change at tier 2. So, tier 2, either a parent isn't engaging with us, or the expectations that we've laid out within the plan have not been engaged with or adhered to. And then what needs to happen and should happen, although it's very difficult for staff, especially when we're working so closely with children and their families, is that we need to move into tier 3, which is enforcement action. So we don't move instantly to enforcement action. What we do is we follow a process where we make them aware that if we're unable to effect change, or we're unable to evidence that they are engaging with us, that this is what will happen. And that will include that first warning notice of prosecution, moving into a final warning, an education planning meeting, or a school attendance review meeting, a meeting where basically we explain the legal framework and what the possible consequences for parents and carers is if we don't effect change with that child's attendance. What is really key in tier 3 is that tier 2 never goes away. Tier 2 always remains in place. Those pupil support plans are always in place. The adjustments and supports that have been offered remain available, remain in place, and we're always absolutely consistent with our approach in terms of making sure that remains available. That has to be available at all times, and we always remind parents that is available. Those adjustments and support mechanisms are still there. We want to effect change, and that's what we're there for. But once we move into tier 3, we will follow that process, and we will follow it in time, in a time scale that means that we're not allowing children's absence to just linger and just drag on, that we are looking to be instrumental in that change early on, because that's what we want. We want children in school regularly. That's where we know that they're safest, they have the most potential. So tier 3 is, we never want to go to enforcement proceedings. We don't want to prosecute parents. We don't want to issue penalty notices, but we will. So obviously we adhere to the parental responsibility measures. We use the tools at our disposal if we need to. But what we're keen to make clear to parents, children, young people, is that tier 2 support, those pupil support plans are always available. They remain in place, and we're constantly reminding that that's what's there for them, that we will consider the barriers to attendance always, and that if anything changes, that they're just to let us know. We're always checking back that what's in place is still relevant, is still necessary, that we can't make those changes. Tier 4 is really where we go to legal action. That's where we go to those legal meetings and where we make the decision to issue the final warning notice of prosecution, and we agree a number of sessions further, unauthorised absence, and the case will go to legal. And again, even if we go there, that pupil support plan is always available. We still remind parents and carers that is always there, and they can tie in with that. We make children and young people know that it's always available to them, and all of those adjustments and support that we've discussed along the way remain available to them. What we've seen over, we implemented this strategy. We went into all of our secondaries in September, and we piloted it in a couple of primaries from September. It was rolled out to the rest of the schools from summer 1. And what we've been able to see is an instrumental change, actually, in a sense of belonging, both with our pupils and engagement with our hard-to-reach families and our parents in general. We've seen a 0.997 increase in our disadvantaged children's attendance over the course of this academic year, and I believe that is instrumental because of our tiered response and that sense of belonging and that value of our children and our young people, and helping them to know that we value them. There is no judgment. We're not saying, where have you been? We're saying it's good to see you, and that's where it should be, and that's where we need to be. It's not perfect. It's still a work in progress. Resource at tier 2 has been very difficult for schools. We've got it right in some schools, it's not quite right in others. What we're finding is where we delegate particular members of staff to that role is where it works best. It's most effective, actually. People are clear about the roles and responsibilities. The pupil support plans become more consistent, more fluid. So we're finding that resource, that named person or persons, is key really in making that Tier 2 work as well as it can. And Tier 2 is instrumental in the whole of the strategy in terms of effecting change. So there's a little bit more detail in the case study within the toolkit. And, if you needed to or wanted to have a chat with me about it, then please do feel free to contact me via Truro and Penrith Academy Trust, and I'll be happy to discuss our strategy with you.